Hello, everybody. It's Susan again, or just Susan for those of you who prefer. I'm back to talk about the Mars opposition to Pluto. So Mars is moving into Leo, and there's quite a lot that we can reflect on and reflect on from a collective perspective and also individually. So to begin, I wanted to show you the chart that is the ingress chart for Mars moving into Leo, and that's where the opposition really starts to tighten up. So an important chart, and unusually I kept the ascendant in. I don't normally do that, but it's always interesting when there's an ingress. I'm using universal time, by the way, so the ingress itself is tomorrow as of me recording this. It's on the 18th of April, which is the Friday of this week. And universal time, unfortunately, Astro Gold keeps annoying me and won't let me just put universal time if I change the time. BST -1, British Summer Time -1 is universal time, so about 5:21 a.m. If you adjust that to, let's say, East Coast time, North America, that would be about midnight between the 17th and the 18th, and going forward during the day on the 18th. So most of the world is experiencing this ingress on the 18th. So you can figure out the rest for the Pacific time, etc. Here we have a really interesting dynamic because the ascendant for this particular chart is in Aries. And that's also because at this time of the year, this is the roughly the time that the sun rises. So the ascendant always marks where the sun rises on the day um, of the event, let's say. And if the sun is moving around the chart, it still holds where the ascendant was when the sun was at that particular point in the sky. So let's leave that aside because that's an astrological thing that describes where the ascendant is in your chart. But here we have the ascendant and the sun in the same place. And so this early morning ascendant for the spring here in the northern hemisphere is in Aries, and it's ruled by this Mars. And that's why I was trying to highlight that. And that Mars just moving into the fifth house from the ascendant is also trining Neptune at really very tightly within a degree and trining Mercury within a degree and a half. So a very interesting dynamic on its own. And then the other aspect of this is that the sun itself, which is exalted in Aries, ruled by this Mars, is also in a square. It's still holding to what is called a separating square from Mars. As Mars moves away into the fifth house, the sun starts to move into the second house, and they basically keep their square aspect for a couple of days. If we give that 2 or 3 degrees on either side, it's the next few days after this ingress. It's already been the case, the Mars squaring the sun. The Mars square sun is about taking action. It's about doing something based on what is necessary in this moment, based on what we realize in the area of Aries, where the sun is, and in the area of Mars, where that would be the sign of Leo in your chart. Mars is trining Neptune, where we can have a kind of a notion of something that is necessary to do based on our higher interpretation of life or this moment in time as a righteous action or a spiritually guided action, but it can also be diluted. And that will depend again on how you relate to life and how you relate to your own circumstances. This is not an energy for waiting for things to happen if you want to see improvement or change in your life. So far too often people will say to me things like, is this going to be good or bad? Or, what's going to happen? And the question is, what do you want to create in your life? And how will you relate to what is going on? So is rain good or bad? This is another way of looking at it. Is sun good or bad? Well, it's again, what's your purpose? What is the reason that you want to do these things, or what's the result you're hoping for, and how do you interact with that? So this is not an energy for waiting and seeing. It's an energy for deciding and making choices. With Mars in a trine to Neptune, you can make really interesting choices, creative ones also based on this higher vision for yourself. If we just abstract and take Aries at face value, the self is what's represented by Aries, something new, a new initiative based on what we want to create, how we want to go forward in life. It's very dynamic and pioneering and forward thinking energy, but it can also be very selfish. And the same thing with Mars in Leo. Mars and Leo can be very much about what I want, what I desire, how I want to show up or be noticed. And so this can be a relatively explosive dynamic on its own if we are only thinking from a selfish perspective. So we want to think from an enlightened, self-interested perspective that is also bearing in mind the inclusivity of all others and the fact that we can't be separated from anything else that's going on in the world or anyone else that's alive at this moment. So this is a tension that requires some kind of expression of choice. Squares are always a tension between the Sun and Mars, and the trines are always very fluid and flowy. They are have the nature of Jupiter, which is about something expansive, something that can create based on an ideal or a wish or a preference or something that is coming again, ideally from the higher minded area. We have also a Mercury in a trine to Mars. It's actually now building to this trine as Mars moves forward into Leo. Mars is separating already from it's building as it ingresses, but very quickly will separate from the trine to Neptune. So this can also be used as the insight. The Mercury-Neptune creates a certain insight that is based on what we wish to see, how we wish to see things be different, how we want to express something of our needs or ourselves, and what action do we need to take based on that expression. So the trine is very helpful. It supports the action of the necessary action or requirement for adjustment that is represented by the square. Squares are always about the energy of Mars, and that's very interesting that the dynamic of Mars is really strong in this square. Mars rules the Sun, and it obviously is being ruled by the Sun. So there is this mutual exchange going on between Mars and the Sun in Aries. So this is also coming to this place of saying, okay, there's something now. I need to be inspired to do this new thing, and it's me that's taking action. It's me that's doing something about it. And the reason that this becomes quite important is because we're in a time where so many events are happening around us that are genuinely out of our control. The train has left the station, that ship has sailed, whatever metaphor you want to use. We've got ourselves into this situation. So we can't pretend that we're not somehow participating in this situation. And we have to understand where our role is either contributing to a change or creating more of the same problem. And with reference to karma, for example, the notion of how our actions, past and present, are affecting the present and future, we also want to understand how our thoughts are also a part of karma. So past action, our current thoughts, and what that leads to in terms of future action or action in the present is all karma, and it's not happening to us. And karma is not something necessarily negative. It's not related to punishment at all. It depends on simple correlation between what has gone before and what is coming through this moment and going forward. So this is the moment. This is also very Aries now. It's all about now, this particular moment. How do I see things clearly in this moment? And in what way do I want that to be sustained or move in a different direction? The other thing that's very interesting is that the midheaven at this point is also in the very early degrees of Capricorn. So again, I don't normally use these placements when I'm talking about an event, but I find this very telling. And so whenever it's speaking really loudly to the event, I definitely call that in. Mars is the exaltation ruler of Capricorn. And the midheaven is about an awareness of, in this case with Capricorn, it's an awareness of what we want to achieve, what our higher aims are in this lifetime, how we might be perceived, or what we want to achieve to be remembered in a particular way. That's the midheaven, and how we show up in the world. And this is why, for example, Mars is very ambitious. Mars is ambitious, the Aries type, rather, ruled by Mars, is very ambitious. And that's because we've got Capricorn in the 10th house from the first. If we look at Aries, whether it's sun, moon, or ascendant, the 10th house from that placement is Capricorn. And it's about doing something that is noticed. It's about taking initiative and doing something out in the world that is going to achieve something. And this is really the Aries drives. I want to achieve, I'm striving, I'm reaching out. because also Mars, which is the ruler of Aries, is exalted in the 10th house, the Aries type is really always reaching out into achievement, into accomplishment. It's not necessarily good at finishing up the job, but okay, we'll leave that aside for the moment. And the other aspect of this dynamic, so this is something to think about as well. What is it that I'm trying to achieve in this moment? And the energy in this moment is let's just get this started, but think in terms of the long run. What's going to be the consequence of my choice and my actions now based on what I'm hoping for in the long run? Don't worry about the details of how to get there at this stage. We're thinking like an Aries here. So you're worrying about how can I do something towards this bigger goal, and we'll let those details fall into place as we go. The Mars in this dynamic of Leo is actually quite creative. It's quite inspired action in the highest reference of Mars, and especially here because we do have that Mercury and Neptune dynamic, where again we want to aspire to this initiative that's bringing us something that is enlightened, that's bringing us something that where we can envisage a new uh, dynamic in society or in our role in society. Aries is about me. What do I do? So all of this is on the ascendant, affecting the ascendant. Now we have a sextile from Pluto to Mercury, and Pluto is moving again. It's not going to perfect the sextile to Neptune until this summer, and that will only be after a phase of a few weeks of Pluto being retrograde. But the sextile is actually still relevant here within less than 4 degrees, or it's yeah, actually it's less than 3 degrees. It's a 3 degree sextile. That's pretty relevant actually. And then with reference to Mercury, it's definitely holding a sextile. And that's important too, because then we're looking at this from the perspective of a new way of considering the problem. So we're looking at everything in this moment in time through a lens of what if, how could we conceive of something different? Thinking out of the box, thinking in a new way, thinking in a way that is in the enlightened self-interest of the individual creating the plans, but also in terms of the contribution. So, noticing where you might be more of a taker than a giver. And with Aries, it's really all about inception. It's about doing something, taking action, not waiting around for others to do something that you benefit from. Um, we also have still at this moment a very, very long-lasting conjunction between North Node, Saturn, and Venus. It's really tight at this time of the ingress of Mars. And this is also a big signature of these times. So this has been a good few days already. It's been over a week now that this conjunction has been holding, although the degree points are shifting a little bit. And then it's also holding to a sextile to Uranus. Now, previously, if you remember from about a week ago, Mars was part of that dynamic because Mars was trining from Cancer back to this Venus, Saturn, and North Node, and in a sextile that created a mini grand trine with the Uranus in Taurus, all around 25 degrees. But the energy of that moment was again about inspired action. It was based on what do I need to feel secure because Mars was there in Cancer. And now Mars in Leo is taking that notion of how to have an understanding, let's say, of internal security or an inner or even a security of my property, my stuff, my family, but taking that also the step further in terms of how do I relate to all of that? What's my emotional reactivity or reaction to what's going on, and how are my emotions coloring perhaps my choices? Now when Mars goes into Leo, it's not about emotion any longer. It's really about taking action based on this impulse that's much more guided by inspiration, ideally, and guided by a need to do something in one's best interest. This is Leo. Leo's always kind of reflecting the self-interest or the best interest. And that's not because they're necessarily selfish. Often it's quite the opposite. There's a strong ego, but in the opposite direction of meaning that there's an insecurity around the identity of self. And so this is where we want to really understand that the Mars in Leo can be um, coming from this place of insecurity around the identity of self, but we can't waste our time any longer with this notion of little old me or, who am I to do these things? And we have to come to this place where you're alive in this moment. You are the fact that you're breathing and that you're alive and that you're here is enough to validate your actions. And taking the action that you see is the best placed action in this moment is the reference to this Mars. All of that dynamic has been understood from these sextiles from Uranus back to Saturn and Venus, particularly, as well as the North Node, which is really a new signature in time, saying that we need to become more clear about our values, how those values need to be taking us forward into something that is valid for the collective, something that is valid for quite some time. These signatures are rare. We've never really seen this before, but at the very least, from the North Node Saturn perspective, that we only get every 11 or 12 years. So that's, again, a relatively rare thing. And even the Venus North Node is usually once every 9 months. And it's here in this case, we've got the retrograde. So it's been 3 times in the last couple of 3 months, since January even. So we've had a lot of reflection on our values, on who we relate to and how. And all of these questions are now coming to the point where we're taking action on it. Now we come back to this Mars. And this Mars story is also part of the bigger arc of dynamic between Mars and Pluto, which is every 2 years they come into opposition. And this is really only I guess it's the second time that we've had Mars in opposition to Pluto while it's in Aquarius, the first time having been in January, the first week of January. I think it was exact on the 3rd of January. And on the 6th of January, Mars backed up into Cancer. And ever since then, it was in Cancer until this day, on the 18th of April, when again it's coming back to this place where it was at the beginning of January, retrograde at that point, and in opposition to Pluto. So prior to that, November 4th of 2024, Mars was still in Cancer. It was at the last degree of Cancer, and Pluto was for the last time in Capricorn at 29 degrees, and that was where the opposition happened before. So we're starting another new way of opposing, another new opposition between this Mars-Pluto. So the way I see the Pluto in Aquarius is not quite as light and fluffy as some other people might describe it. For me, the dynamic of Pluto in Aquarius is very much about an overhaul of society, an overhaul of how a society comes together, and the hidden motivations of how we connect to each other, as well as our deeper connection to what is mine and what is not mine. And so all of those things come together, and how do we divide up our shared spaces or our shared governance or our shared economy, for example. We see globally, and that's not unexpected, that there's a huge movement towards totalitarianism. And again, it's been building for a long time. It's not new. It's just that now things are coming to a crux. They're coming to a head, if you like. All of that period of time, for example, from May of 2018 until this point where we still have Uranus in Taurus, we know that part of that dynamic is around issues of fascism, totalitarianism, control of resources, control of money, the money systems, change of financial systems. We saw that in the 1930s up to the early 40s when Uranus was in Taurus the last time. And we're seeing it in spades this time because on top of that, we have Pluto in Aquarius. And so that dynamic towards this move towards totalitarianism, which started many years ago, and we can't only say it's begun only because of the Uranus in Taurus. It began many, many years ago, I would say even especially strongly when Pluto moved into Capricorn. But even the seeds were planted well before in the 90s when Pluto was in Sagittarius. Again, that's an ideological thing, right? Pluto in Sagittarius, it's about ideology and how that is weaponized or otherwise used in weaponizing religion, for example, weaponizing politics, weaponizing ideology. We can see that that was the story of the 1990s that led into the 2000s with Pluto in Sag. And so I'm rambling a bit here because I'm highly caffeinated today. I thought I'd just jump into the theme of Mars opposing Pluto and bring that vibe right in here. So I also have I'm squeezing this in between appointments, so I'm under pressure here, a very Mars Pluto thing as well. But all of this to say that this energy of this time also is going to reflect what is going on socially, and that's the Pluto in Aquarius. Now, Pluto in Aquarius is also a way of defining our own sense, if we come to the inner experience of Pluto. How do we fit into society? What is my contribution to society? How do I relate to the people around me? And my favorite way of describing Aquarius is that they love humanity and they hate humans. I really can't find a better description for Aquarius than that. And this is the problem with having Pluto in Aquarius, because there is this whole transhumanist movement that is real. It's definitely also a part of an agenda of depopulation and the notion of the fantasy, you could definitely call it, of if less people are there, there's less competition for my stuff and I can own more stuff. And this is, we see that in spades amongst the power players, and Pluto represents power. Now, here the dynamic with Mars in opposition to Pluto, and here I'm going to just flip this to the current transit so we can get away from the ingress chart. And I'm just going to move this forward a couple of days. When we start moving into the actual opposition of Mars. So now we've got Mars here, 1 degree. I'm going to keep moving. So then we want to get to the 26th. It's not only the 26th, by the way, but it's all this week leading up to that point. And here I'm going to have to just take away these, the ascendant, descendant stuff. So let's just do that. All right. So when we get to this opposition of this Mars, remember the Mars story that I was just describing to you is about idealism. It's about what do I want? How do I want to take action based on my enlightened self-interest, with keeping in mind that I am a part of a bigger whole and something new and different has to come through here, that Neptune, Mercury, and I can think out of the box and do this in a new way. And it's inspired, it's that Mars quality of, hey, look, I exist, I'm alive. That notion of Leo, which is radiant, which is inspiring to its followers or the people who are paying attention, let's say. And here, when we have that notion of me, myself, and how I'm operating, how I'm contributing in whichever direction to the greater circumstances, we have that in reference to what is my opponent, what is the opposition here. And part of that opposition is going to be an understanding of who's your daddy, who has control over you. The dynamics of Pluto, they're in opposition to Mars. It's really about power dynamics. It's really about who do you allow to have power over you? What do you give power to? The other day I was speaking with a client about the notion of, success or failure because of the economy. And we can't really give that any credence, because the notion of the economy is this very fuzzy, very Neptunian, actually Neptune Mercury notion of what is real. And the notion of the economy is often based on things that are spoken about in the news, where they give you, in fact, incorrect details about what is true, so-called true about the economy, usually to beef it up a little bit or to scare people a little bit, whichever direction. But what does that actually represent? And so here what we're looking at is notions and concepts, and what do I believe? What do I put faith in? Who do I give power to? And how am I reclaiming this power for myself? How can I see how I need to take action and no longer be scared by the boogeyman? And that's the Mars here in opposition to Pluto. So we'll have a look in a moment about where this is going through your charts, your natal charts. But this is really significant, because that notion of, who do I give my power to is so important in this quite literal transformation of our global circumstances to this kind of technocracy sort of slash theocracy slash totalitarian economy and society. We have to be really clear. What do I stand for? What are my actions contributing to? How is my behavior contributing to something positive in the world that I can grapple with at this moment in the form that it's coming? And what shall I be doing about that? So all through this week, once Mars moves into Once Mars moves into Leo, within a couple of days of that, the Sun moves into Taurus as well. And so basically from let's say the 19th, 20th, now we start to get this really powerful T-square that's building up all through the next week, meaning exactly the 26th, where the opposition is from Mars to Pluto on the 26th of April. That whole week prior to that is creating this quite astonishing and quite powerful T-square. And the T-square requires adjustment. A T-square requires an awareness of what it is that we need to take care of or become, again, actors in. And the sun always represents the self. And now we've got the sun with a focus on its security, financial security, its relationship to what is sustaining us or oneself, depending. And that notion of all of those issues of security have to play a part in understanding where we need to take action. So this is also part of that dynamic where the sun in Aries is much more about what do I want? How do I want to do it? How is this going to be affecting me and how am I affecting the whole? Now with the sun in Taurus, it's much more about trying to ground something that is based in reality, based in something secure. It's not simply an initiating energy, but it's an energy of recognizing where what I do now is going to affect my stuff, my security, my way of living. It's also very strongly related to values. So Venus, of course, is always ruling values and our sense of value. What do I value? What is the nature of human value, for example? What is my relationship to humanity? And again, we come back to that Aquarius notion. There's often you hear people I think it's coming from what they think is the right place because they're angry and they're upset about how our experience of life is shaping up at this moment. But people will be very angry at humanity itself, talking about hating humans, talking about hating society, hating whatever aspect of all of that. And the problem with that is that aside from not solving anything and contributing more anger and hate to the energy, is that it actually is debilitating, and that causes more ruptures. And I know that the intention is not that. The intention is to point out what is flawed or what is inappropriate, what is simply not in alignment with that person's values. But in doing so, they're also rupturing their own relationship to the greater whole and the values that even they espouse. So on the one hand, they're railing against the enemy, as it were, or the violence or the genocide, pick your country, and all of those different obscenities that we're aware of in terms of the news at the moment. In projecting anger and hate towards that, we're not any different to that. And this is a really important realization. This is also where Mars in Leo is about waking up to what is the right action, what is the right attitude in order to achieve something coming from the heart. The Leo represents the heart, coming from love, coming from a place of standing up for what is still human. What is the most human aspect of ourselves? It's the heart. So here we have Venus at the same time ruling that sun, which is squaring the Pluto-Mars opposition. Venus is now really strongly with Saturn. Her exact conjunction with Saturn happens at the same time, basically, just hours before Mars is opposite Pluto. So this is also including the North Node, and the North Node is still in this very, very powerful sextile to Uranus, again saying, think differently, become aware of how your sustenance or your support networks or your finances or your food or whatever is needing to transform or be changed, and how you participate in that, how you allow that, and how you need to take action to move things in the direction that you are now aware you need to go. So it's a tall ask. These are not easy times, but what I want to emphasize here is that there's an individual action that is required. And even if that action is simply to unplug from the manipulation of the media and the manipulation of the political realm and the insanity of the quality of so-called leadership, which is also very Leo, by the way, recognizing where we are quite literally being led by fools and people who have no further interest in except their self-interest. Basically, they're all pretty venal and short-sighted. And so we're dealing with a situation where we have to, and this is very Pluto and Aquarius as well, take things into our own hands because the circumstances around us are no longer viable. We're no longer in Kansas. Um, and so here we have this opportunity to become aware, and it's necessary. It's like time is running out in terms of the notion that we'll wait and see how people can fix this. And by the way, none of the people you think are fixing things are actually fixing things. So you want to really get real, what is happening. And again, that notion that certain actions are good because you like your guy or your girl or whatever it is that's out there. This is really important. It needs to be questioned, and here this would be where I would say that the Neptune and Mercury conjunction hopefully will disabuse people of those illusions of who they keep putting up there as heroes. And this is where the Mercury in Aries is back, by the way, at this point to its retrograde cycle. So this is also the ending of Mercury's retrograde shadow, because that's where Mercury is stationed on the 15th of March. So we're back from 15th of March. We've taken this long now to get Mercury back to where it was retrograding, stationed retrograde just after the eclipse of the 14th of March. Now that cycle has been understood. So this is where you're really aware now of something in a way that you weren't already, say, 6 weeks ago. And from this point on, Mercury is taking us into a new dimension. It's new, different. It's based on what I know. It's based on what I want to act in. It can also be simply impulsive. This is where I want to highlight this notion of the Pluto-Mars opposition. Stuff is getting real in the world. These are no longer, this is not just reading 1984, things are real. I'm, for example, going to London next week. I'll be in London for at this opposition time. I'm traveling the day before. Couldn't avoid that. And yeah, I'm not super thrilled about that because the United Kingdom is sort of leading the charge in terms of denying human rights and open dialogue and so on. And one thing I've noticed just in the last week, which is already when this tension has been accumulating, is that in regular media, mainstream media here in Europe, like El País and Le Figaro and Le Monde, these papers have been posting about what are your rights if you travel to the United States. Do they have the right to take your phone? Do they have the right to look at your content? Do they have the right to download content from your phone, take away your phone, and not give it back? Can they deport you based on your social media? And the answer that they give pretty universally is, yeah, you don't have a leg to stand on. So we buried the First Amendment notions in the United States a while back, many years ago indeed. Now people are waking up to that fact, but this is now where it's really becoming obvious. It was already the case for many years before, despite whoever's team was in the office that you preferred. This is already where we are. So when we're talking about it's not conspiracy stuff. It's not like Discord or Rumble talking about this stuff. This is in Le Monde, which is a broadsheet. It's a respected mainstream paper. So it adheres to the mainstream propaganda line. And even they are saying, you know what, don't take risks if you want to get into the United States, if you don't want your phone what's the word, confiscated, or if you don't want problems based on what is the content in your phone. This is where we are. So this is now why I'm putting this high notice, let's say, on this Pluto in Aquarius, which was always problematic. It was never going to be fairy tales and singing Kumbaya. that can be an aspect of that. You can do that in a segment of society that you create for yourself, but it will no longer be as a part of the greater whole. It is, by definition, where you have to marginalize yourself. So the way that you marginalize yourself, the way that you move in or out of the dynamic of society is this moment and how you understand your role in this moment. What do I choose? Who do I give my power to? And what action do I want to take based on what I want to see happening? Now, for some of you, you might find that this actually is literally about a relational dynamic, especially if you have a Leo rising or an Aquarius rising. This might be some dynamic of relationality if you have, for example, a Scorpio rising or a Taurus rising, and especially within the first 5 or 6 degrees, you already had that issue brewing in November and December. So that's not new. It came to a head in January. It's not new, but now you're coming back to that really extreme message. So that's for all of the fixed signs. This can be very directly related to something that has to do with either a personal and professional relationship or an interpersonal sort of romantic type relationship, or even a choice between the type of work that you do and what you need for emotional, psychological, and financial security, just as an example. We'll see that as we go sign by sign. I'm just checking to see if I've left something out because there's so many things to talk about at this time. Yes, I'm going to leave it at that and we'll continue now through the signs, and I'll just go back to Aries um, so we can get to Aries on the ascendant. All right. So this is kind of where we were in the introduction. So Aries, that's definitely something to listen to. If you're one of those people who skips the introduction, please don't this time and listen, because it's definitely going to affect you very personally. This dynamic is it's kind of like you're written into it. You're the star, as it were. So Aries, of course, this is a very unusual time for you because you've had a lot of activity in your house of self. This is for Sun, Moon, and Ascendant in your house of self, and the awareness around yourself and what you want and how you want to achieve it. And this is also, it's been a relatively tricky time because also Mars, which is your ruler, has been retrograde, and that cycle of retrogradation basically started. I mean, the shadow phase of it started in October last year. So there's been quite a lot of dynamic around sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, this kind of not being able to move forward, which is immensely frustrating for Aries and for all fire signs, but especially Aries. And now it's going to start to shape up in a way that you can actually move forward. Now we've got Mercury direct in the same part of the chart where it was when it stationed retrograde on the 15th of March. And so there's a dynamic here that ran all the way through March, where Venus, for example, on the 1st of March was pretty much where Mercury and the Moon are in this chart. And then also the 29th of March, we had the eclipse there at the point that Mercury is at as well. So there's a lot of energy that has already been expressed, let's say 1 month ago, maybe 2.5 months ago, if you really want to go way back. And this is now where the action can take place based on what you've understood, how you're moving forward now in a new direction. Now, this is not action in terms of, for example, starting a new thing. It would be quite tense action for starting something new. Like just for an example, I'm not an Aries. I have my midheaven in Aries, but and my midheaven just happens to be at that 9 degree point. But for example, I'm going to London for a workshop, for a week-long workshop. So that's got an action built in, but it is not necessarily establishing something out in the world. It's more about integrating something, learning something, working therapeutically through something, and then later on, a week later, taking that out into the world. So this is a great time for that sort of thing, where you have this understanding of things are moving in this direction now, and based on this is where I'm going forward with that. Now, one of the things that can show up because of the Mars opposition to Pluto is that there's something in the dynamic of your love life. Mars rules your house of self, but it also rules your house of intimacy, the eighth house. Intimacy in sexual terms, emotional, psychological terms. It's also what you share with other people. And when Mars is in the fifth house, it can be about romance, about romantic engagements or romantic um, yeah, relationships of all kinds, and especially also with reference to children and whatever you create, your creative energy in terms of how you express yourself, and also the creative energy in terms of what you actually put out into the world. And that can include children, quite literally. You're creating something, putting it out in the world, and we'll call it a kid. And so here we have that Mars in opposition to Pluto, where there's something in terms of your future, your sense of what you want, how you see your future, how you see what you are getting from society or how you're getting acclaim or otherwise, or the way that you see your participation out in the world, as I described in the beginning, how that is being affected by your creative output, how that's being affected by your desire to do something and create something. And no doubt you're in a place where you just feel like you're revving the engines ready to go. You've had so much activity for a year and a half. You had the North Node through your first house. Now you've got Neptune since the 30th of March in your first house, and Chiron has been there for many, many years already. So you're working through issues of insecurity around yourself and feeling unseen and so on, that it's definitely something that you're healing in terms of how I can be myself. And all of this dynamic is emphasized at this moment by the Mars now shifting signs and saying, go now, do the thing. Go back to January in particular and notice what was happening. What was the obstacle? What was the challenge to me showing up as myself or me doing the thing that I wanted to express about myself? What was the risk I wanted to take? And then suddenly it felt like I won't dare do this thing. If it's with reference to children, then was there some dynamic actually in your child's life that needed attention or needed an adjustment that quite literally was because now the future looks different and now something different had to happen around the child or your engagement with your child, for example. And again, if it's not about children, is it about a love relationship? Is it about something that you're creating? Fifth house represents entrepreneurship as well. There's quite a lot of opportunity here. Jupiter's in your third house of commerce, which is ruled by that Mercury now in this fresh new place, just as of the 26th of April, saying, this is again all that you've learned now for the last 6 weeks, minimum, since mid-March, you can now put into action, and that would be with reference to commercial activity. Where else are we going with this? Yeah, so that if you're an entrepreneur, this is really good. Pluto is in your 11th house of gains, what you gain from what you do in the world. It's how you gain attention and acknowledgement as well. And that's another dynamic here for Aries, is that there's a desire to be acknowledged openly, publicly, to receive love, to receive admiration, to receive accolades. And so again, this Mars creating something new, your ruler, creating something new in your house of self-expression is also, uh, let's say, confronted by your perhaps fear of what if they laugh at me? What if it's not adequate? What if it's the wrong thing to do or whatever the thing is? So understand psychologically that Pluto, the unconscious motivation, the unconscious fear around that Pluto, the unconscious drives and passions and even obsessions. And Mars is asking you now to question all of that, to see where are you giving the power? Are you giving the power to your audience to the detriment, for example, of what you'd like to create? Are you giving the power? Like I said earlier, there was a conversation I had with a client this week where we were talking about this notion of the economy was bad and I couldn't do this thing. And again, are you giving your power to something as abstract as the economy? and then believing that that's why things didn't work out. So where do you need to focus on that Mars energy? That's your ruler, that Mars energy coming through really, really strong. And then the dynamic to keep in mind around this is this notion of the sun, my values, my income, potentially quite literally the money and how that's going to come through. My family, the second house is family as well. What supports me overall? Notions of food or money or possessions that support you, and including the second house reference of resources, meaning yourself, you as a resource, for example. So this is a bigger part of this moment in time. A big story for Aries. It's a one of these moments where we're all deeply impacted, but Aries, you are kind of like the lightning rod of this moment as well. So good luck with all that, and I'll see you in the next video. So Taurus, Sun, Moon, and Rising, this dynamic is very intimate to you, especially if you have early degrees, let's say up to 5 or even 6 degrees of Taurus. Any of the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. So I have candles on it, and my Deepa is on in the back there. The flame is flickering, so didn't want the house to burn down. And so, yeah, we have this in your fourth house. The new dynamic for you is about understanding your security needs. This was part of the movement of the Mars retrograde. Go back to November, particularly starting from the 4th of November and into the 6th of January, especially with reference to the first week of January. And know that there was already an opposition between Mars and Pluto the first week of January in this area of your chart. Is there something to do with your career or your sense of what social role you play, or what part of society are you participating in? Pluto in the 10th can reference the desire or ambition, real deep drive and, real obsessional desire to accomplish something, to be acknowledged, to be remembered, is another way of saying that, to be memorialized, even, to be known and referenced. And this is something that with Mars in the fourth, your actions are based on what makes you feel secure or insecure around how you achieve that outer goal. Now, another way of saying that is my home. This fourth house is property, home, like in a physical sense. Where do I live? My inner home, my psychological and emotional home. And the dynamic around my lineage as well is all of that being affected by what is going on in terms of the authority figure and who has authority over me. For you, this is quite a literal question because you've got Pluto in the 10th, and that is the house really of authority figures of all kinds, including what you could describe as the government, or the social authority, the social dynamic, social pressure, parental pressure as well. So how are you interacting with all of that? Mars, as I said before, is in your fourth house of lineage and where you come from, including the homeland, or where are your people? And Mars rules your 12th house of ancestors. It rules your house of relationships as well. So something here is very powerfully connecting you in this moment to your ancestors, or to things that are happening abroad, things that are happening far away, or beyond your conscious awareness even, or in terms of what is an unconscious fear or motivation around what's going on in the world. The fourth house is the psychological foundation of your life, and it also is a reference to where things come to an end. The fourth house is like the midnight part of the chart. If we look at that in terms of where the sun is at the darkest part of the night in the fourth house, it's metaphorically where the sun has come to an end, and it starts then the new cycle of the day from the fourth house, moving up into the ascendant where it appears again in the sky. Um, so this notion of Mars in the fourth house can also be where you're recognizing that there's a pattern that needs to end, or there's a connection that needs to end. Mars is about stopping, severing, separating, and you're recognizing that there's a pattern that needs to be dissolved or changed. Now, Mars is in a trine to Neptune going into 12, and that can be based on unconscious issues, including psychological ones or addiction type ones. This has to end. This is the end of that story in such a way that I can show up in the world and be different. And that can include connections with like an ancestral story or a family pattern that hasn't really been good for you, that hasn't been helping in some way and or another. And you are now aware of that. You are now going to take action on what it is that you need for that area of security. Of course, Uranus has been changing you, your dynamic of showing up who you are, how you are, even physically what you look like, especially for the ascendant in Taurus. Uranus has been going through your first house since May 2018. And Uranus is very much part of this story for you because it's been so impacted over the last few weeks by these sextiles, first to Mars and continuing now to Venus, your ruler, with Saturn and the North Node in the house of the future for you. So what you're doing here is setting you up for this vision of the future that you're looking for, or for a vision of the new way of relating to people around me, new society, new friends, new way of showing up. Fourth house is also your relationship to your literal house and home. There may be some issues that need to be taken care of in a very practical way as well. So we can't leave that aside, but it's not, I think, not the most growth or life-changing place at the moment. We got to go deep inside at this point and try and understand who we are, where we're coming from with all of this. All right, good luck with all that, Taurus, and I will see you in the next video. So here we have Gemini. I keep saying Jupiter because it's broad, it's bright in there. Gemini is now on the ascendant for, oh my God, Gemini is now the ascendant that we're talking about. Sorry, my coffee's starting to wear off, I think. And we've got Jupiter, of course, in Gemini. And this is a very interesting dynamic because the third house, which actually is the natural house of Gemini, is where Mars is at this time. And so there's something here that needs to be pointed out, chosen, expressed, said in such a way that there's an opportunity of choice or expression, self-expression. And it might come through something that has to do with a commercial enterprise or something that connects you to siblings, or in this case, maybe doesn't connect you to siblings because it's Mars in the third house, something that needs to be dealt with around siblings. Ironically, for Gemini, often siblings are a really big issue. Not ironically, it's quite literally what the sign represents. And so this might be something, for example, that is part of the dynamic that needs to be dealt with for Gemini. The Pluto opposition is in the ninth house, and that ninth house is about your sense of purpose. Why am I here? What do I believe in? What is the thing that I'm driven by? Or what is my ideal vision of life? And this can be where you recognize with that Mars in the third house, where something may have been over idealized. Things, especially with Jupiter in the first house, sometimes it can be like, hey, it's all great. This is what I want. This is all going to pan out. Jupiter also rules your 10th house of your career. It rules your partnerships as well, your relationships. But here now, the dynamic is that there's an opposition, there's a challenge to that idea that might also involve something that is the everyday nitty-gritty stuff. Mars rules your sixth house of what is your obligation and duty and what you need to do to really get stuff done. And Mars rules your 11th house of your future and friendships and the money that you might earn from what you do. It's not income, it's gains coming from other sources, including if you're an entrepreneur, how you might gain money. But this is something that might be you're realizing that the vision that you had for the future or your ideal way of seeing life and how everything panned out is being tested at this time. So for example, there may be something here around needing to just buckle down and work a little bit more, be a little bit more coherent. Gemini, especially for strong positions in Gemini, like the sun, the moon, and the ascendant, or especially if you have a stellium there, choices are very difficult because there's this kind of a feeling of there's so much out there, there's so many things, and the ideal solution doesn't really exist. It's like, well, both could be good, or that looks really good, and what I've got here is like, So there may be this feeling with a Gemini type of always having to sacrifice something, and that makes the choice difficult. I'm afraid of choosing because I'll lose something. Where Mars here is saying it has to be done now, the choice has to be made. I need to use my willpower. I need to decide. I need to learn this thing or teach that thing. I need to say that thing. I need to connect in this way, not in this way. So there's a decision here that's very crucial, it seems, in terms of the immediacy of day-to-day life. This is the third house of what is practical, what is here and now, what is today. So the sun, which of course is ruling that third house, is in the 12th house of the unconscious. And that's something to reflect on because it can be that there's a fear around this choice or a fear around how that might change your life. Um, do I have faith in what I'm doing? This is the Pluto. What do I have faith in? What is actually driving my sense of why I do what I do, or my sense of purpose? What is my purpose? With Mars in opposition to Pluto, you might also find that you thought your purpose was one way, but now you're being challenged by the reality of the situation, and you're having to almost, in a way, stand up for your purpose or stand up for yourself in terms of why you think you're here. And it's actually quite constructive from that point of view because it's taking you with more clarity into this new space that the North Node and Saturn and Venus and everybody else has been fulfilling up in Pisces in your 10th house of career and your place of what you achieve out in the world, social status included. So there's a moment here where you need to really consider how you speak, how you are clear or not when you speak, how you make those choices, and how that will, of course, impact those around you. Um, yeah, and the sun in the 12th can also be where you're starting to recognize things to do with the spirit world, the spirit realms, and how that is becoming more important to you, or the choice is based in that as well. We do see you've changed a lot in terms of your spiritual connection. That also can be an instability, perhaps, around the connection with your ancestral or sort of spiritual ancestry or literal ancestry, with that connection, or your connection to what is a habit or good or bad habit, or some kind of self-undoing. This can also be where you're realizing, yeah, I've sold myself short here. I need to make that change based on my true values, and say what I need to say, make the choice based on my true values. If this has something to do with a sibling, Mars rules the house of the elder sibling, usually the elder brother, especially because it's Mars. And as I said in the beginning there, with Gemini, siblings are always a big issue. So there may be something here that is affecting you through a sibling or through a cousin type relationship or an uncle of some kind. Right, there's too many options. I would need to see your natal chart, so I'm going to leave it at that, Gemini. You see, it's all those choices. How do we manage? All right, see you in the next video. And so Cancer, this is happening in your second house of earned income, your values. What is my value? What is the value of things, and how do I relate to that? It's quite literally the resources that you have to hand. So it's your possessions and money and income and things like that. What's available to you, and it's everything that sustains you, what supports you. It includes your family, dynamics around family, and how that might or might not support you. And with Mars going in there, there's some action that you need to apply. You need to become aware of this new status, this new thing that becomes more serious, let's say, especially with reference to earned income from your career. So Mars rules your 10th house of your career. For those of you who are married or planning on getting married, that's the house of social status, for example. So this might have to do with marriage partners, and how you divide up resources, because we've got Pluto in the house of shared resources. It's also the house of marriage, what you share with others, including morality. Do I share their vision of life? Do I share their morals? Do I share their values? like even more fundamental things. Do I do the dishes? Do they do the dishes? It's all those things that we share with another, including intimately, psychologically, emotionally. And so this dynamic here is a reflection in the T-square with the sun there of how your income is affecting your future, or how money and resources can affect your future, and the choices that you make based on that in terms of maybe strategy around your work, because that Mars ruling the 10th house for Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising is really important in terms of the work, the way you move forward with your work. Um, and so also Mars rules your fifth house of children. There may be something related to children, the life of your children, or something you need to do around that, or something that you're motivated by as well. Second house is family, so the notion of maybe now it's time to establish a family. Let's make this work, or let's decide we're done here. We have our family, or we're choosing not to, for example. Um, all of which determines your social status as well. And 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 that, by the way, social status doesn't mean class. Sometimes people confuse that. It's not about which class you're in. It's not about a caste thing. It's about just social status. Are you married? Are you not married? Are you employed? Are you unemployed? Are you a parent? Are you not a parent? Those kinds of things where socially we acknowledge each other through those different ways of relating to each other. So that Mars is affecting that from the second house in opposition to the Pluto in the eighth. So again, this notion of intimacy through Pluto in the eighth, which can also come through psychological stuff, aware of fears, for example, aware of fear of intimacy, or I'm aware of fear based on family issues, based on what I've inherited from the family. That's the eighth house. Inheritance from the family is not just financial, it's also the patterns of, psychological behavior, or patterns of unconscious behavior, um, family drama, family crises, family issues, and what might be coming up, and how might I need to take action, the Mars in the second, for my family, to support my family. So the second house is what supports me, but if Mars is in there, usually there's nothing supporting you. You're the one doing the thing, at least, especially in a natal chart. It may not be the case by transit. It depends a little bit on each individual chart. But the point remaining that this is the target of the Mars, which is really to figure out what are my values, how am I taking action based on that, how will that bring me support or otherwise. How does that connect to other people's values? How does that connect also to what I want to accomplish overall in life in that 10th house way? Um, and of course, with the sun being very directly in the 11th house of society and friends and so on, how does that connect to my friends and the society that I spend time with? Um, My gosh, so much is going on for all of us that I'm not even sure how much more to say, because it's just endless. And I think I've said quite a lot about these other aspects especially in terms of the North Node in the ninth. But that, of course, is part of the overall story, because that's where the integrity and the life guidance, as it were, the philosophy of life behind all of that stuff, the wisdom that you use to achieve all that stuff in the 10th house. This is all part of the dynamic. Mars is trining the Neptune and Mercury conjunction at this time, and Mercury is back at the same place that it was when it stationed retrograde on the 15th of March. It's also the same place that roughly within a degree and a half, that's where Venus stationed retrograde on the 1st of March, and that's where the 29th of March solar eclipse took place as well. So if you go back over the last, say, 6 to 8 weeks, give it 2 months actually, yeah. So from the end of February, go back over this period of time, notice how everything has been shaping up to give you the answers to what this moment entails. The first time we had the Mars from the second to the eighth house was the first week of January. And you can reflect also on that. What did that mean for you? How did that pan out for you? Was it with reference to money? Was it with reference to how you take action based on money, or based on negotiating what you need to do to accomplish your goals? That Mars, again, ruling the 10th, ruling the fifth house, is part of the bigger story of the Mars. So Yeah, I think you get the idea. So yeah, good luck with all of that, Cancer, and I'll see you in the next video. So Leo, you can probably imagine that this is very personal to you, especially if you have the first, say, 6 or so degrees. You have maybe sun, moon, or ascendant in the first 6 degrees, or if you have a stellium in Leo, this will be felt. It'll resonate through your stellium. And certainly with the opposition, where in March 2023, Pluto first moved into your seventh house. This has already been a big change for you. It's already shifted things with reference to relationships and power dynamics in relationships. Now you're really seeing this loud and clear. Since the first week of January, or during the first week of January, you had the first opposition here from yourself to the other. The notion of what action do I need to take? Where am I using my power or not? Where am I withdrawing my power? Where is there something that I need to step up and do? And again, the classic story of the Leo is that they are selfish and all about, being seen and doing this thing. But often what happens is they take the other end of the ego and they diminish themselves. And so the ego is related to I am not good enough, as opposed to I am fabulous, look at me. And so we want to be somewhere in the middle. It's like I have the right to exist. I do exist. I can radiate exactly as I am, who I am in this moment, neither with this egoic sense of insufficiency and little old me, or this feeling of how fabulous am I. And so here what we're looking at is, where do you use any of that? Where are you mm, allowing others to abuse of your kindness or your power or your capacity to be there at all costs? One of the challenges in relationship for the fixed signs is a tendency to hold on too long when relationships are no longer good. And that can work in both directions, that you don't allow the partner to leave, or you hang out when it's not good. Either way, it's not good. So this could be a real moment of choice where you recognize that now my actions here, what I need, this is the Mars in Leo in the first house saying, I need this thing. I need to take this action in order to find a better balance in terms of relationship, and what the consequence will be, to recognize the thing that is let's say, affecting this choice, or the adjustment that is part of this choice, is how I show up. What is my social status? So will I be engaging in a direction going towards relationship or away from a relationship? That's going to affect my social status. If I'm negotiating in a business partnership or a dynamic of some kind of relationship with clients, for example, this is also seventh house stuff. Um, this is also going to affect my status, my social status, or my career status. So here we have this really big moment of understanding. This is a very unusual pattern where we're not going to have this dynamic of tension in this kind of fresh and new energy again, because the next time, in 2 years' time, when Mars will oppose Pluto, we will have understood all of these things as we're moving along now in a new direction. But at this moment in 2025, all of this new energy is just huge. It's just really, really huge. So you want to think of this in terms of you growing through your life in a way that you want to sustain for a long time to come. And especially with the partner that you're with, or with the dynamic in relationship that you want to sustain. Is it working for you? Now, the ruler of your house of relationship is Saturn, and Saturn is with Venus and on the North Node. And so this dynamic can be something to do with marriage, marital relationship, or it can be something to do with intimacy, or something to do with how you share resources in general with people. Again, even receiving money from clients, for example. Do I need to adjust that, a different way of receiving money from clients, or dividing up business resources, for example? Very big part of that dynamic. And this is going to create something quite long term. It's happening in your axis of self and other, and that affects also your sense of security, as well as how you reach out into the world. So quite a substantial moment in time. Mars rules your house of home. So this is and home, and your inner security, your sense of what grounds you, what foundation of life are you relying on? And it rules your ninth house of your sense of purpose as well, which is also changing. So now, as you get a new sense of purpose, a new vision, or a new sense of what you have faith in, what you believe in, this is where the choice becomes more clear. Oh, right, this is who I am. This is who I aspire to be. And that makes this choice all the clearer. Also, with Jupiter ruling your eighth house, ruling this Venus, Saturn, and North Node, as well as ruling your house of children and creativity. Jupiter is in the house of the future right now. So, this is an extra message to say that all of those factors are going to feed into the future that you really want. Think long term here, Leo, when you're making these choices, and think in terms of how you're participating or not, because choosing not to participate in these choices is still participating, but what you're doing is you're giving your power away. So am I aware of my power, and am I learning where my power center is? Or am I just creating these power struggles because I'm giving away too much of that? So this is a really good opportunity, for example, to learn about issues of codependency or dynamics that, where you're working with any level of narcissism or any level of, I mean, everybody calls everybody a narcissist nowadays. So, I mean, true narcissism, where there's something that is really threatening to you, and not just where you don't like the person, for example. So where is this impacting you as an individual? Because it's personal to Leo. This is all about how you're planning to show up now for a good long time in the future. Good luck, Leo. I'll see you in the next video. And so we have Virgo here, and this dynamic is playing from the 12th house of your unconscious mind to the 6th house of your everyday life and how that shapes up. And it includes your health overall, the notion of mental and physical health, emotional health, the dynamic between the things that you do that may undermine your well-being, and how to stop it. So Mars in the 12th is fantastic as an opportunity to put a stop to things that are not good for you, not healthy for you. Mars rules your eighth house, which is also a psychological house, and it rules your third house of choice, and communication, how you connect with people. And with the eighth house particularly being very active at this time, there's a lot of awareness or insight into your unconscious motivations, things that might be based on fear, for example, or might be based on issues around intimacy. You've got a lot of relationship dynamic at this time. So issues around intimacy, issues around integrity and honesty. So that third house is also about that. Your word. What is your word? What is it worth? Are you holding that? Your ruler is Mercury is back at the same point that it was when it retrograded mid-March. So the 15th of March. And we saw Venus retrograde pretty much at that point on the 1st of March. And that was also where the eclipse was on the 29th of March. And so there's a big story here that has to do with intimacy or what you share with others or how you feel about what is more hidden from view, what might be considered a secret, or even depending on the individual, what is a shame? Do I feel shame around this thing? And can I turn that around? Certainly the last 6 weeks would be an opportunity to discover that and to reframe it. Certainly that's also part of the reframing that's possible with Neptune going through there. Issues of abuse potentially, or again, the dynamic of what you share with another, whether it's physical intimacy or emotional or financial sharing, it's all part of that equation. And Mars there in the 12th house can relate to something that also connects you to where your actions are undermining your overall growth or well-being. And now what do you need to tackle, as it were, so that you get on top of issues that are really difficult. Like the sixth house is all the challenging stuff. And when Pluto goes through the sixth, it forces you to face up to certain challenges that otherwise may have been ignored. That can be a really radical growth and transformation for you. It can be a fantastic time to develop yourself physically or in terms of your health or in terms of your everyday habits. all of which support you and support the dynamic of relationships as well. That's the sixth house supporting the seventh, and or otherwise taking away from the seventh as well, potentially. Um, for example, when Pluto went through my sixth house, I had a number of health issues, all of which were, stacking. They're like domino effects, most health issues, unless you get hit by a car or something. But when all of those things I was having to deal with all of those things. At the same time, I was learning immensely, like just learning a phenomenal amount about healing and health and genuine healing and overcoming patterns of not taking responsibility in certain areas of life. And this is where you are in this, where you can really consciously take advantage of understanding where you are not doing things in your best interest, not making the best choices, and you need to stop that. It could be things like addiction. Um, for some of you, it can be quite serious things about behavior around sexuality, or because the 12th house is bed pleasures as well. It can be even issues of integrity around honesty in relationships. Am I in a relationship that is deceptive? Am I deceiving somebody in a relationship? Am I um, in a relationship that I can't reveal, for example? These kinds of things can be there in terms of how you want to go forward, because Mars is in Leo. It requires integrity to get the best results, as it were. The Sun, which is a reflection of all this in the T square, is part of that awareness of the choice point in the tension is it's in the ninth house of your vision or your sense of purpose or your sense of what you have faith in. It's the also an integrity house. It's about what is the right thing to do. 1, 5, and 9 are houses of dharma, or the sense of your purpose coming through a higher vision, and what is the right thing in this moment, what is the right thing for me, what is the right thing for my life, etc. And that's where the sun is reflected back right now. Um, and so that's the solution. If the obvious choice isn't there for you, you want to look to that higher place of what guides me, what is the highest value that I can find in this moment in time, and make the choice based on that. So much to say. And then, of course, Jupiter is still favoring you from the 10th house, and that will increase the favor and the blessing for Virgo. Sun, Moon, and Rising will increase as Jupiter goes into the 11th and bring you a wider vision for your future. And this moment in time is going to contribute to that future. So being in integrity around the choice, also this dynamic of 6th and 12th house, aside from being the healing axis, it also shows us where we're in this dynamic, especially important for Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Rising, is this dynamic of being of service compared to being in servitude. And so really recognizing where you might be undermining yourself by not being in a conscious role of service to others, but rather feeling like you have no choice. I'm obliged to be there for others. And this would be the opportunity to say, wait a minute, I'm no longer playing this role of victim. I'm nobody's rescuer. I don't need to do this. So that brings out that unconscious motivation or unconscious fear that might be there through the eighth house, especially, and that you can make a new choice based on that. All right. So go with that, Virgo, and I will see you in the next video. And Libra, this is happening in your 11th house of the future. So Mars has just entered the 11th house and is now in opposition to Pluto in your 5th house. So Pluto in the 5th house over the last couple of years has already been inciting you to show up in a new way, but also especially with reference to wanting to be seen. And so you're more aware of how people acknowledge you or don't. And that, of course, is also a part of the dynamic of how you relate to yourself. And what do you need around that? And Pluto going through the 5th also allows you to recognize aspects of yourself in terms of your expression of happiness. What brings you happiness? What do you do with that, through whether it be a hobby or some kind of other creative self-expression, or sex as well, through the sexual act, through romance, growing in a new way through that. Is it around children, the relationship to your children, or the idea of having children? This is very, very much the agenda of Pluto in the fifth. That's like, I need to be seen in a new way. I need to be seen in this particular way through who I really am and my expression of self. Now, Mars is in the 11th, and that's in the opposition to this Pluto. It's saying something like, now, this is the vision I have for my future, but this part of me, there's something about this fifth house aspect where Pluto is that is pushing me in a new direction or is challenging me to get where I want to go in that 11th house. That might require you to recognize the true motivations, the unconscious motivations for either your sexuality or your sexual relationships or children, having children, not having children, the way you create, the way you express yourself, finding the unconscious stuff around that. What is the obsession? Or what is the block, or what is the fear around any of those things? And then Mars, in opposition to that, is asking you to take action in this new way. And that might be taking action, again, towards a new vision for your future. 11th house is your vision for the future, and or towards relating to people who will go along with you in that journey towards this future. Mars rules your 7th house of relationships. Now, is that also about redefining who you belong to as a group, as a collective group, a political, social, what are those, religious type of group that you belong to? And maybe now you're realizing that's not going to take me where I want to go. That doesn't bring out the truth of who I am. Now that has to end here. So Venus, your ruler, is also with Saturn at this time with the North Node and Saturn, where she's been for over a week, 2 weeks even, and creating a whole new vision for yourself in terms of the dynamic around what you think every day should feel like and how you maybe want to do a new job or a new way of showing up every day in terms of your own health as well, in terms of your work, in terms of how you're there for others, or where you recognize that's not part of what I want any longer. Mars is again ruling your 7th house of others, the important others, the life partner, the business partner, the counselors and people who you work through, clients as well. So there's something new and different that needs to come through there. And Mars also rules your other house of money, because the 11th is a house of money as well. Mars rules your 2nd house of resources and income and money and so on. And so maybe this new thing is also recognizing how you have new opportunities to develop resources. But to get to that, you're going to have to come through that Pluto and understand how you might need to change and bring more of yourself out without this, without the fear of how you show up. Libra often, whether it's sun, moon, or ascendant, Libra can have a tendency to wait and let others tell them how to show up, or there's such a hyper accommodation around other people that you're not fully showing up. And Pluto says, and this is where that ends. And so here we have that Mars showing you what needs to change and how to do that based on what future you want to see, based on using your resources and your values to get to that point. The sun, of course, is that aspect that is in the square to Mars and square to Pluto. So there's the adjustment based on the sun is showing us this part of what you share with other people, what values do you hold with them, how do you relate to your psychological self, and maybe your things that you've inherited through your family, patterns of behavior, patterns of relational dynamics, for example. It can also be with reference to what benefit do I get from a particular relationship. If this is specifically about a relationship, then weighing that, and am I actually getting benefits, or am I giving more? And this is not actually where I want to be any longer. Again, that comes back to your ruler in the 6th, getting serious about what my obligations and duties are. This is a long-term thing, and then how do I want to move forward with that every day, for the foreseeable future, for a long time to come. I think that's it there, Libra. This is an interesting time. It'll be a time for you to really practice making choices that may not be comfortable for you, but it's what needs to be done. Scorpio, your ruler, Mars, is in your 10th house of career and your social status, marital status, for example. And and this is showing up in a way where your decisions around what you want, your ambitions and your aims, what you desire in terms of um, advancement in career or your personal ambitions, whether it be specifically to this moment or overall, that's really somehow in opposition to or needing to adjust to Pluto, which is in the fourth house, where that has been already 2 years, changing your relationship to home, literally the physical home, but the feeling of home as well. And that changes your feeling of emotional security. So you're in a process of really huge growth and transformation around the notion of what grounds me, the notion of what I can rely on in terms of my unconscious feelings of safety and security, feelings of support. It connects you to your lineage as well, a transformed relationship perhaps to your family of origin or the family that you've created. And then, of course, the Mars also rules your house of the everyday, the work house, the habit house, the sixth house of obstacles as well. So whatever is going on here in terms of the choices, in terms of how you show up in the world, it also will change or will have consequences for that sixth house. So not only just for yourself, but how you are handling what's going on in the sixth house, all the challenges and things that you have to overcome. This might be issues around health as well. Um, there can be quite a specific issue around your marital status or your business partnership status because the Sun, which is in a T square to the Mars and Pluto opposition, is in the seventh house of relationship. And so there's something you're aware of that you become that needs to be you, let's say, are aware of the dynamic of relationships and how that needs to be changed based on where your ambitions are, what actions you want to take, and what is going on in terms of your inner experience of life. Fourth house is property as well. I mean, in a more literal sense, it can be literally buying a house or home and property, but it's this. I think this goes deeper. This may be incidental to some of you that you're purchasing property or thinking about property, but it's very personal. It's something that needs to be adjusted to. It's your ruler now that is changing signs in a square to you. You have to do something differently to achieve what you want to achieve. And that can rock the boat because Mars in the 10th, anyway, but especially in Leo, where there can be a strong sense of ambition. Mars is very ambitious in Leo, all the more so for a Scorpio rising. Um, is this where you might be stepping on toes, or people might be feeling that, even if you're not trying to do that, but they may feel that you're doing that. So this requires a certain balance between you and another, and that's where the Sun in Taurus comes in. What is the result to relationships? What's the result, the quality of all of that? How is it affecting partnerships, for example? Will that support or take away from my ambitions? Go back to the beginning of January. So the first week of January will give you a flavor of what this was for you in a more specific sense. And if you have anything in Scorpio 1 to 6 degrees, um, or if you have a very strong Scorpio imprint, you will definitely be impacted by this. It is your ruler at the top of your chart. So something to do with let's say a longer term ambition, at the very least for 2 years, and otherwise for quite some time because it's a significant, unusual time. And these choices will be impacting your everyday experience as well. All right, so Scorpio, make the best of this. I'll see you in the next video. Sagittarius, Mars is in your ninth house of your vision for your life. Why am I here? What is life all about? What do I believe? What do I have faith in? The ninth house also represents teachers, counselors, figures who guide you, including parental type figures like your father, for example, with the ninth house. Especially Leo, very quite literally representing that prominent male father type figure. That's very Leo. And here we have the Pluto in opposition from the third house. And this is about your local space, about your everyday knowledge, your everyday life, and even the people around you, your everyday friends, perhaps also siblings or the dynamic around siblings. This can be on a more psychological level, the dynamic around your early childhood. Certainly, issues around communication are deeply affected by this opposition. It's that where the Mars in the ninth house is very idealistic. It's got this kind of spiritual warrior kind of energy. What do I want to do? What do I want to achieve based on what I believe in? And Pluto in the third is like, what is true? It's about finding the essence of what is true. And so with Mars in the ninth, really trying to stand for this higher purpose, higher meaning, and the opposition to Pluto really pushing to find what is true and real for me. And for you, this can have something to do with health and everyday issues because the sun, which is in a square to this, is in your sixth house of obstacles and work and um, dealing perhaps with health issues. And so that Mars also rules your 12th house, which is sometimes called the house of self-undoing, or the things that are behind the eyes, things that we're not fully aware of, either they're dreams or they are unconscious motivations or they're too far away. They're literally too far away to be able to be seen with the open eyes. You can only see these things through the closed eyes in the 12th house. And so this is maybe an awareness also of how the unconscious motivations are now participating in this, or at least let's say consciously what I believe in, what I have faith in, what I want to see happen in life are now affecting your unconscious motivations, or affecting your spiritual connection, your spiritual life, and how that's participating in this moment in time. And your fifth house is also ruled by Mars. And so this can have something to do with your way of showing up and your way of expressing yourself through who you are, your individuality and your creativity. That's the fact that Mars Aries is the fifth house for Sagittarius is what gives Sagittarius their very unique kind of go it alone sort of dynamic. And this is also part of that moment in time. Where am I going alone based on what I believe? And this new thing that's coming through that fifth house with the Neptune and Mercury conjunction, and also where Saturn meets up with Neptune for some time, for a couple of years, you're going to have this very new thing about this is me now, this is how I show up. And so the sun in your sixth house may be a good opportunity for you to see how issues around health, or perhaps how you might not have been working towards your best interests, or how self-indulgence, that's also the fifth house, potentially, issues of self-indulgence, unconscious behavior, any problem with drugs or alcohol abuse, or just not taking responsibility, in a simple way, not taking responsibility for things, how that has affected now your everyday life and how you're aware of that. And now you start to see that the choice to go forward is based on a higher vision for your life. Mars in the ninth, on a very sort of mundane level, can also have you fascinated by traveling or going away or learning something new, learning something with a higher meaning. It's not sort of like life, like everyday stuff. It's not learning like computer programming. It's learning the meaning of things, or the higher vision for things. And this can also take you in new directions, which will affect your fifth house of creativity and your fifth house of self-expression and your 12th house of faraway lands as well. So one other way of looking at this. Yeah, so you're one of these signs that's really on a deeper inward journey at this time, especially with the North Node, Saturn, and Venus in your fourth house. And there's something about relationships because we've got Jupiter, your ruler, in the seventh house of relationships. That is, of course, not only your ruler, but ruling that fourth house that participates in this dynamic. So there's a bigger question of how you are in day-to-day life based on how you're feeling about yourself. And a lot more of your energy is at this moment required to understand what grounds me, either what grounds me literally and where do I live and how do I live and so on, but also how do I feel about all those things and what's my sort of psychological state at this point. Um, and also where am I real? Am I being real? Am I being realistic? Like the Pluto in the third is going to make you get real. And especially in terms of the practical everyday stuff, but also in terms of how you connect, how you communicate. It's probably going to be a much more like a intensity around the way that you communicate, more gravitas as well. And this might be a moment where you really feel like now I need to speak up about something. All right, I think that could be about it. So many things to say, Sagittarius, as you know, as a good Sag. So I will leave it at that and I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn. So Mars is in your eighth house. Mars does really well for Capricorn. It's your exaltation ruler, and it does bring you a certain feeling of that ambition and drive that you're always looking for. So it makes you feel accomplished. And Mars does far, far better in Leo because it's very decisive and it can bring you clear results. Now, the thing is that it's in the eighth house. So Mars in the eighth can also cause a certain amount of disruption in terms of relationships because unless you're having really hot sex, which is one possible way for this to manifest, it can cause a lot of disruption in terms of the feeling of connectivity that the eighth house represents, which is really about this, intimacy, and it's a tenderness, it's an emotional intimacy. It's one of the reasons that Capricorn has a difficult time with the intimacy is because the sun rules the eighth house, which is not known as the most dynamic sort of intimate planet. It's the moon is intimate, the sun is outward going, and so intimacy is not Capricorn's forte. And then, of course, Mars rules the fourth house of your emotional connections and the emotional psychological self. And again, that Mars in the fourth is kind of like, standoffish, let's say. Um, that's the archetype Capricorn. I'm sure you're a perfectly loving and intimate Capricorn, but I'm just saying for now, the Mars that rules the fourth house, also ruling the house of the future and friendships and your ambitions and your drive for the future, which is, by the way, also why Capricorn is so ambitious. It's always thinking about the future. It's acting towards the future. It's got plans. It's got strategy. It's that Scorpio on the 11th. That Mars now in the eighth is really about all those things that connect you to somebody else and where that might need to be redone or redrawn. Lines need to be redrawn. Pluto is in the second, which is a house of family and money and what you can rely on. And so there's a strength and a power here with Pluto going in the second that initially can come through real problems around money or real obsession around money and security and things like that, the value of things, including yourself. And, with Mars now in the eighth house, it may be where you're really starting to get clear where you're not able to share or receive from other people. Maybe this is a good lesson to recognize where the inability to receive, which is also a Capricorn trait, which is again why with Leo in the eighth, it's hard to receive from others. You tend to be the giver with the Leo in the eighth. That dynamic of Mars is showing you where that's working for you or not. And, in some cases that can be fine. And in other cases that can feel difficult. It can feel isolating and lonely. And this is, again, one of the reasons why Capricorn can feel quite lonely because it's lonely at the top, right? So here we have this dynamic in opposition. So what is it about your values and what you are ambitious towards with that Pluto in the second that the Mars is requiring you to adjust to? So what's the adjustment here? And is it maybe overcoming a fear? The eighth house can be representing fears. It can represent things that are unconscious, family programs, family inherited programs. If there's something to do with a loss around a death, for example, or something to do with an accident or money that you'll receive from insurance or money that you might receive from inheritance, is this something to do with that? Is there something that needs your attention, needs you to stand up for something? Is there going to be any dynamic around challenge in that area? Now, the sun, which is in a T-square to all of that, is in the fifth house. This might involve something to do with your children or it might involve what you otherwise would make you happy. What is the dynamic here to bring about my happiness, to bring about myself? How can I be more of myself by being more in a place of security financially? This is the second house, eighth house axis, which is all about the money and financial security, but also issues of trust, issues of security, whether it's in terms of who's got my back, but also in the financial security realm. And with the sun in Taurus in the fifth, you might be here ready now to take some kind of risk to do something in a new way, because you're seeing now how you want to take action differently, or how action is required and a new innovative way is required. If you listen to the introduction, you'll hear more about that, because Neptune with Mercury was about seeing out of the box and seeing something different. There's something insightful and new in that combination in a trine to that Mars. And that's coming through that place of your psychological security, or your feeling of emotional stability and security, home, and what that represents. And certainly there's a big change around that for Capricorn. Your ruler Saturn is with the North Node and Venus in the third, but the Saturn movement into your fourth house, which I'll do in a separate video, that's the 25th of May, that's going to change the whole dynamic around security. So what you're looking at here is part of the choice point, let's say, to getting towards this new security, this new way of being, all of which supports your career, by the way. So the Venus rules your 10th house. I throw that in there as a bit of bait for Capricorn, very motivated by aspirations and career, social status. That's because Libra is on the 10th house. The status matters for Capricorn. That's because of Libra, not because of Capricorn. And Venus is there with Saturn and the North Node. And Saturn is the exaltation ruler of your 10th, as well as your ruler, and Venus is the ruler of your 10th. So there's something very big here from the third house point of view that feeds into all of this. Venus is ruling your fifth house where the sun is. And that choice, that third house is your choice. It's now the decisions you take, the action, the way you use your willpower, the way you connect and communicate with people, the way you network and work in the everyday with people. The way you use money also is another way of saying that third house is the commercial the commercial exchanges of all kinds in the third. Right. Okay, we could go on and on, but I think that's it for now, Capricorn. We'll see you in the next video. Aquarius, well, you, of course, also are deeply affected by this moment in time. You've got Pluto in your first house of self, whether it's sun, moon, or rising. Think up to 6 degrees. This is going to be really impactful for you. And you've got Mars in the house of the other. So either there's another person who is pushing back and somehow antagonistic, or somehow forcing you to respond in a new way. This can be very empowering, by the way. It doesn't always have to mean something is bad happening, although there may be cases where that's true. But the lesson is, how am I standing in my power, or how am I entering into this endless kind of struggle with power games, mind games, power struggles with other people. Mars rules your 10th house of your social status and career, and your ambitions and your aims in this moment, and how you want to be seen. And so that Mars in the 7th is playing a huge role, because the dynamic and how that plays out with the other, whatever that form might take, with the important other, is going to pan out in terms of your visibility, how people see you, and the social status and the ambitions that you have. And it's not necessarily that this is all out in the public. That's not what I mean here. It's like that's going to affect how you show up in the public, including, the way that are you showing up in a way that's meek and mild and hiding yourself from the public, or are you showing up in a way that says, hey, this is how I'd like to be seen, or this is how I want to change things around here, for example. Mars rules your third house as well, which is all about your creative side. That can be quite literally creative in terms of like musicality and using your voice, using creative expression. How do you dialogue with people? This is one of the things with the Aquarius archetype, can not you, the archetype of Aquarius is that Mars rules the third. So Aquarius tends to talk at people, and share more of a one-sided ideas-based way of communicating. And this is part of the dynamic here. Perhaps there's this aspect to the relational quality. Is the relational quality being supported by what you're doing and how you're doing it? This is especially true because so much of the activity of the last 3 months or even more has been in your third house of communication, sharing information, sharing ideas or not, because it's Aries. Um, how are those choices? How is your individual, unique way of showing up in community affecting relationships, affecting your career, for example? That's also going to change as Neptune moves in there with Saturn. Be interesting now to see in a generalized sense, for the next decade plus, how Aquarians in general start to change. What are they? How are they going to communicate? What will they communicate and how are they going to communicate? It's very much based on their own opinion, based on their own self. But with Neptune there might be some really unique way, because Aries is about the self, pulling something uniquely through that voice, that new voice, this new way of channeling a voice, or expressing an opinion, expressing a unique perspective on life, which again is very Aquarian. It's because Mars rules the third. This is the perspective on life that we bring. The opinions, the third house. Um, yeah, I'm rambling here. Now the moon, no, sorry, the sun is in the fourth house. So for this dynamic, this opposition from Mars to Pluto, this dynamic is somehow affecting or impinging or requiring you to adjust around the notion of your home and security, your emotional nature, perhaps literally about property. This might be a negotiation with somebody around those issues, around the quality of home, or it might be around the notion of family, the family that you have created. Also, because your ruler Saturn is in the house of family. Second house is family in the sense of how the family affects you or supports you as you're developing. That's your initial environment. And the fourth house is the family of origin, let's say, so that continues with through the lineage also, and then it's also the family that you create and the home and homestead, as it were, including potentially property. So those dynamics around family, and how all of this impacts all of that, the relations that you devise with people and how that might affect your family at this time, based on that security, based on what you need to do for your family, for example. Saturn with Venus and the North Node in the second is asking you to really get sure of your values. Your values are important at this time, and the Venus rules your fourth house there where the Sun is. All right, yeah, it's a big point of choosing at this time. So please listen to the introduction, Aquarius, and I'll see you in the next video. So Pisces, this Mars opposition is in from the sixth house to the 12th house. And here it's really about how you show up every day. It can be also with reference to that quality that can be a Piscean quality, the notion of overgiving, trying to rescue others, being there, being seen to be there for other people, the dynamic of victim and martyr or victim savior. Um, Victim perpetrator as well. And that's part of the dynamic that's very strong for Pisces anyway, but that's the sixth and 12th house axis that can therefore also lead to issues around health and healing, day-to-day well-being, day-to-day work, and what you overcome, what you have to deal with, and the 12th house, what is holding you back from that, or what is not serving you, or what is done behind the scenes, for example. And the 12th house can also be about the unconscious mind. It can be with reference to the spiritual realms, the spirit realms, faraway lands, people from faraway places, or your ancestors who have passed, but also spirit energies that you may never have had any contact with otherwise. And so here in this, with Mars in the sixth house, your your efforts, your motivations, let's say, are all very much to do with work and overcoming patterns that may have up until this time been really difficult to establish because of all of these retrogrades and Mars going back and forth between your fifth house, where there can be a certain amount of self-indulgence because that's ruled by Cancer, or whether well, it's ruled by the moon, which is depleting some of the energy of Mars. So the decisions are harder to take, not so certain. Now with Mars in Leo, decisions are clearer. There's a courage and a willingness to show up every day and do the right thing, do the thing that now you understand you want to do. And that Mars rules your second house of your values, your money, your resources. For Pisces, the second house shows that you are your resource. It's Aries on the second house. You are your best resource. You're endlessly creative as a result of that because you just show up and you say, well, I got what it takes to do the thing, so let me do the thing. And Mars also rules the ninth house for Pisces. And so this quality of what you need to do now, the need to overcome whatever it is in the sixth house that you're working on, whether it be a health issue or work-related issue, or a need to show up and be there for others, that's also affected by this ninth house vision of why am I here? What is my higher purpose? It's driving and motivating that Mars in the sixth house. And that's for 2 months, by the way, the Mars. But this is particularly with reference to the opposition to Pluto, which is contesting the perhaps fear or sense of uncertainty or the unexpressed things that Pluto can dig up in the 12th house. Mars is now pushing against that and forcing a choice to appear, forcing a decision. The sun is in a T-square to all of that from the third house, which represents the immediate aims of life, the choices that you have to make, the willpower that is required. And that's ruled by Venus, which is in your first house of self with Saturn and the North Node at this point. And so all of this dynamic is showing there's something here about how you need to use your choice or your willpower, your voice, obviously, as well, because that's third house. How do I communicate this? And based on what I'm seeing, I really want the choices here, the dynamic here between that sixth, the 12th, and then the third house are all impinging on you in the first house because Venus is ruling that sun from your first house of self in this really rare configuration with Saturn, which rules Pluto at this time. And of course, as Mars is ruling your second house and ninth house, it's also affecting your values, or it's affected by your values, driven maybe by your values. Both your feeling of self-worth as well as what you feel is important, what is of value. Right. I think that's it, Pisces. Jupiter, your ruler, is at the bottom of your chart. And so that's also giving you a sense of a bigger feeling, let's say, of support around what grounds you, what supports you. There's a feeling of confidence that is there with Jupiter in a way that hasn't really been um, let's say, obvious or felt so much because of all of these retrogrades where there's been a lot of psychological attention and emotional attention and going back and forth into choosing, back and forth into trying to figure things out. Now the expression of all of that becomes clearer as Mars is in Leo. Venus soon will be ruled by Mars in the second house. It will be much more of a forward-thinking, action-oriented stage. And from June, well, the end of May, 25th of May, Saturn moves out of your first house into the second, also ruled by Mars. Then Jupiter, your ruler, moves into your fifth, where again, there's going to be an expansion of optimism, creativity. And with Mars still there in your sixth house, it's going to really feed into the everyday, how you connect all of that into how you operate every day. So this has some really interesting long-term dynamics. It would be really good to question or look at any dynamics of victim, martyr, savior, perpetrator, all those dynamics that might be the thing holding you back from accomplishing your highest aims, holding you back from that ninth house idealism that is actually ruled by Mars, based on your second house value. Okay. Good luck, Pisces. I think we've reached the end. So fantastic. So I do hope everyone has got something out of this. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.